Hi, Frank here, and I am continuing reading of Douglas Jerrod. Yes, remember, go to Douglas Jerrod and SamsonPWillings.com to get your information on apprehending a copy of Douglas Jerrod. Look, twist. A memory tale of time travel and what happens. Without any further ado, I will continue reading on Chapter 12. Now, we're back in the blue-eyed section of Chapter 12, and as you probably figured out, every time we're in the blue-eyed section, we're in the facility. So, blue-eyed, Chapter 12, Arts and Crafts Time. Douglas, are you here? Damn it! What is it now? Douglas turned to Eve with a disgruntled look on his face. Really? Right now? When my boys are in the middle of Fred's celebration? What is more important than that? He pondered while he waited for Eve to speak. It's arts and crafts time. You interrupting me for arts and crafts? I don't want to do that. It doesn't? Oh yeah. Matter what you want. It is arts and crafts time. Eve argumentatively replied back to Douglas while she began to stimulate herself again. She squirmed in her seat as the orderlies passed out the supplies of the day. When the orderlies handed Douglas and her their supplies, one of the orderlies slapped at her hands to instruct her to stop her crude behavior. She pulled her hand out and accepted the supplies before the head of the facility came into the main hall to address the lost souls of the building. Good day to you all. If you don't know me, I am Catherine Rose. I am the main director of the facility. Today, we are going to make something for some of the animals whom we share the planet with. Catherine strolled over to a table in front of the room that had the wood supplies that she needed for the day's project. She looked over the pieces and sorted through them shortly until she found a piece that might show the crazies of the hall what they were making. She picked up the square-shaped wood with a hole in the middle and held the piece in front of the group. She thought she would play her own game of memory with them. Can anyone tell me what we are making with these pieces here? Catherine paused shortly to let everyone of the group have a chance to see the object that she held up. A few more seconds went by when she grabbed another piece off the table and held it slightly above the square. Douglas observed the head of the facility as she stood in front of the motionless room. He finally stood up from his seat while the silence of the hall got to him. A birdhouse. We are going to make birdhouses. Douglas blurted out the answer to Catherine's little riddle. He then picked up the pieces he knocked to the floor before he sat back down. Catherine locked eyes on him and followed him down to his seat. After he was seated, she stopped staring him down and picked up where she left off. Yes, thank you. We are making birdhouses. We are helping our aviary friends today. Now, you will need to take the front of the house and glue this rectangle piece for the roof on top of it. Catherine picked up the stick with a glob of wood glue on it. When she picked up the stick, she slathered the glob of glue on the top edge of the square piece. She then picked up the right triangle piece and placed it on top of the square piece to fuse them into one piece. She took the newly made piece and showed it to the room. This is what you should have when you glue the two together. Now, if you don't have some glue now, the orderly will be by with it shortly after you have completed your front piece, you repeat the same process for the back piece while the front piece dries. Catherine put the front piece of the birdhouse back down on the table before she picked up the full square. She repeated the application of glue on the top edge of it. She then picked up the second rectangle and placed it exactly the same as before to get a matching shape as the front. After the pieces began to fuse, she showed the crazies the finished product. See? Just like the first piece. Now, after you have them finished, it is time to place the bird perch stick at the entrance of the birdhouse. Catherine placed the second newly made shape down next to the first one to dry while she placed the perch. She picked up an inch-long 2-millimeter dowel rod piece out of the supplies and dabbed a drop of wood glue on one end of the stick. She then placed the dowel rod under the entrance on the first piece. She blew on the glue spot to help it dry a little before she showed it. Now that we have the front and back done on the house, I will come around and help some of you before moving on. Catherine placed the first piece flat side down on the table before she started her walk around the room. She helped a few of the patients with the fronts and backs of their houses. Then she observed Douglas's work that he already had done in front of him. She shot him a look of approval as she went to help Eve. After Eve was ready for the next step of the project, she returned to her spot at the front of the main hall. Most of you are caught up, so we will move on. Now, we are going to place the front and back pieces to the floor of the birdhouse. Catherine picked up one of the 5 rectangle pieces off the table. She showed it to the people of the hall. When she revealed the piece, she thought it might be easier if they attached the sidewalls of the birdhouse before the front and back. She then picked up one of the other rectangle pieces. Before we place the front and back to the houses, we have to place the sidewalls of the house. Catherine took up the stick with another glob of wood glue and slathered it on the bottom edge of one rectangle and fused it together on top of the floor piece of the birdhouse to make a right angle. She then took up the third rectangle and fused it on the other side of the floor with another glob of glue. Now, as those pieces dry, I will give you a second to catch up while I go to the little girl's room. Catherine carefully placed the birdhouse piece on the table before taking her leave to the restroom. As she was gone, Douglas forged ahead on his construction of his birdhouse. He smeared glue on the front edge of the sidewalls and the floor. He then picked up the front piece and pressed it to the glued area of the side walls and floor. After he held the front piece firmly to the glue to fuse the walls and the floor to it, he did the same to the back. I don't know why she has to show us how to make a birdhouse. Douglas curiously wondered out loud while he waited for the glue to fuse on the backside. As he waited, he turned to Eve to see her progress. After all, she's the one that interrupted his link with his grandson to make birdhouses. She best be making hers too. This is some pretty easy stuff, isn't it? Douglas asked of Eve while he sat aside his project to view hers. He looked over into her lap to see her as she played with her private parts again. Really, this is what she is doing during this time, he thought before he slapped at her hands. I thought you liked arts and crafts. With all that enthusiasm that you had earlier. I got lost in the instruction of the build, and I don't know what to do. Sometimes I just can't help myself. If you stop that right now, I will help you with your birdhouse. You will? Yes. Just take your hands out of your pants. Eve pulled her hand out of her pants and picked up the piece of the birdhouse. Douglas pointed out all the pieces that needed to be put together while she followed all of his instructions. She put the house together exactly for the roof. After the pieces were in their place, she stopped and gazed at what she made as she waited for the glue to dry. Wow, thanks, Douglas. I don't think I would have ever been able to put that thing together without your help. Nonsense. You would have gotten it sooner or later. I just helped you get it sooner. Still, thanks for that. Catherine came back from the restroom as the two conversed with each other. When she strolled past the two, she looked down to see the roofless houses the two had put together. She then gave a nod of approval at the two's work before taking her spot back at the head of the room. She took up the pieces of the birdhouse and started the directions where she left off. Now, like the smart pupils of the day, you take the front piece and fuse it to the housings we just made. Catherine took up the front of the birdhouse after she pointed out the work Douglas and Eve had done. She dabbed more wood glue on the edges of the side walls and floor. Right after she applied the glue, she pressed the front on to fuse the pieces together. She then took up the back piece. After the front of the birdhouse is glued to the house, we will repeat the process to the back. Catherine flipped the housing of the birdhouse around. After doing so, she put more wood glue on the back edges of the side walls and floor. She then fused the back of the birdhouse in place. While the glue dried, she lifted up the unfinished birdhouse to show the room how it should look. So far. She put down the roofless housing before she addressed the room again. Now, I will go around and help who needs help before we finish the roof. The director walked slowly around the main hall. As she walked, she stopped and helped the patients that were behind before she started back to the front of the room. While she passed by Douglas and Eve, she viewed that in the time she wandered around the room that the two took it upon themselves to place the roofs on their birdhouses. She reached out, grabbed them both by the hand, and had them come up to the front of the hall with her. Since these two have already finished their birdhouses, I think they can show us how to finish them. Douglas, Eve, will you lead us? All right. Douglas willfully took over as Catherine handed over the floor to him. He took up one of the leftover rectangles. Then he took up the stick with some glue on it and smeared it on the top edge of the front and back rectangles. After applying the glue, he placed the front and back of the triangles. After applying the glue, he placed the rectangle on it to fuse the pieces together. That is very good, Douglas. But can you tell the room what you did? Eve, can you help me with that, please? Douglas asked Eve for assistance while he flipped the birdhouse around to the open side. He smeared another glue strip on the other side of both the triangles. After he applied the last of the glue, he took the last rectangle piece and placed it on top. As he held the last piece in place for it to fuse, he looked to Eve for her description of what he just did. Eve, will you tell the class what I just did? What? Eve, the description, please. Oh, you apply the glue to the top edges of the housing we created. Then place the rectangle pieces that are left over on top. She described what she observed Douglas just do. She then looked to Catherine to see if she did it right. Catherine nodded in approval of her instruction before beginning the walk around the main hall. She smiled and slid her hand down the front of her pants. Did you see? Oh, yeah. Yes, I seen, Eve. You did a great job. You deserve that. As Douglas finished up his sign of approval, an orderly noticed Eve playing with herself in front of the room of people. The orderly quickly hopped up from the chair he sat in and rushed up to Eve. When he made it to her, he pulled her hand out of her pants. After stopping her action, he began to walk her out of the room. What did I tell you about that, Eve? Looks like you could use a time out. Hey, since I'm done, can you take me to the dock? I think it is time for my appointment. Douglas questioned the orderly since he was already taking Eve away. The orderly paused for a moment and looked to Catherine for the go-ahead. She nodded and waved Douglas off to signal that it was okay. After she made the call, the orderly grabbed him by the arm and led the two out of the main hall. Birdhouses, arts and crafts in the facility. This has been a reading of Chapter 12 of Douglas Jerrod. Remember, Douglas Jerrod and SamsonPWillings.com, and also FJ Invisible at YouTube channel. Subscribe, catch up, see what you've been missing. Thank you, and good day.